Hi there. I'm Davina. My parents gave our family estate to my sister, without telling me. They signed the papers, planned the renovations, even called it a fresh start. I was never even in the room. But that wasn't the worst part. Years before, they'd quietly erased my name from everything, while I was still paying the bills, preserving the house, protecting the legacy my grandfather left behind. They thought I'd never find out, but they forgot about the hidden trust. What else did they hide from me? And how far were they willing to go? The house smelled like rosemary lamb and lemon polish, my mother's signature scent for family dinners. I stepped into the foyer of the estate I once called home, expecting nothing more than a lukewarm evening of polite conversation and awkward small talk. Instead, I walked into a performance, and I was the only one who didn't know the script. Davina, my mother smiled, setting her wine glass down. You made it. Of course I made it. I always made it. Rain or shine, New York deadlines or not, I never miss these dinners. My sister Sabrina, perched confidently at the far end of the table, barely looked up from her phone. Her husband Martin, predictably overdressed in his usual off-duty CEO getup, gave me a nod like he was greeting an employee. Dinner carried on under the weight of rehearsed pleasantries. The roast was overcooked, the tension underdone. I picked at my food, catching Sabrina's smug glances and Martin's forced chuckles. He loved to hear himself talk, mostly about real estate trends and generational wealth. Ironic. Then Dad cleared his throat and the room shifted. We've made a decision, he said, laying his fork down with ceremonial precision. It's time we plan for the future of this place. I glanced around, confused. What do you mean? My mother folded her hands like she was praying. We're transferring ownership of the estate. Sabrina and Martin will be the new title holders. I blinked, just like that. No discussion, no heads up, no mention of me. Not even a fake nod of inclusion. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. They're planning to start a family, Dad continued. This home deserves to be filled with life again. And I guess I didn't count as life. Sabrina offered a tight smile, the kind you give someone you're firing. We're honored to carry on the Harrington legacy. Martin topped off his wine. He was already leaning back in Grandfather Emery's chair like he owned the damn place. That chair used to mean something. Emery used to sit there with his whiskey and tell me stories about the property's origins, how history had weight, how legacy should be protected, not pawned. Now that chair held a man who once suggested turning the library into a yoga studio. I forced a smile, trying to swallow the bitterness burning up my throat. Well, I said, my voice steady but hollow, congratulations. I stood slowly, my limbs heavy. I've got an early meeting. I should go. No one stopped me. No one even looked surprised. Outside, the October wind clawed at my coat as I walked to my car. The estate stood behind me, lit up like a stage set. A house full of family, yet somehow I'd never felt more like a stranger. As I gripped the steering wheel, one thought rang louder than the rest. They've already made their choice. But they forgot one thing. I was never out of the game. Sleep didn't come easy. My mind had looped that dinner scene all night, replaying the smug smiles, the calculated silence. When the morning sun slipped through my condo blinds, it didn't feel like a new day. It felt like a warning shot. Still in pajamas, I shuffled into the kitchen and started my usual ritual. Grind the beans, fill the kettle, pretend I wasn't unraveling inside. Then, ding! A real estate alert lit up my phone. I frowned. I'd set that watch years ago for anything linked to the estate's address. I almost didn't click, but I did. The screen loaded slowly. When the file opened, I nearly dropped my mug. Sabrina and Martin had filed paperwork using the estate as collateral for a personal loan, $500,000. Their names were listed under intended transferees. Intended, as in, not yet actual owners. But they were already betting the house. Heart pounding, I yanked open my laptop and pulled up the Fayette County Property Database. There it was, a pending lien application, filed last Thursday, 3 days before the dinner. This wasn't spontaneous, it was orchestrated. My name? Absent. Not even a footnote. I sank into the chair, breathing shallowly. Did they think I'd never check? That I was too naive? Too docile? I opened my file cabinet, pulling out a worn folder marked Emery Trust. My grandfather's handwriting still sat bold across the front. He had set up a private trust when I turned 25. Not flashy, but powerful, quiet and binding. I'd been using it for years to cover estate repairs, taxes, insurance, all behind the scenes, all to keep the house intact. I'd never bragged, never held it over anyone. I did it because I believed in preserving something that mattered, and now they were trying to mortgage the very bones of it for kitchen upgrades and God knows what else. I whispered, "Unbelievable." I wasn't angry. I was past angry. This wasn't about property. It was about being erased. I printed every document, highlighted every lie. Then I called Walter Jenkins. He picked up on the second ring, voice rough like he hadn't had coffee yet. "It's Davina," I said. "They've made their move." He didn't even ask who they were. There was a pause. Then he muttered, "It's time we talk." I hung up, then pulled an old photo off the wall. Me and Emery beneath the oak tree he planted in 1962. My hand lingered on the frame. "You trusted me with this," I whispered. "I won't let them bury what you built." By the time I met Walter at the cafe, the midday heat had lifted, replaced by a chill that crept in through the windows. We chose a corner table, away from curious ears. He opened the trust file without small talk, scanning page after page with tired eyes. When I explained about the mortgage lien, he didn't flinch, just tapped the paper with his pen. "Premature, illegal, unless they're banking on no one challenging them." I stirred my coffee, letting the silence stretch. "They are." Back home, I couldn't sit still. I pulled out my laptop and started combing through years of documents, PDFs, emails, cloud folders tied to the estate. That's when I found it. Buried in a 2018 archive, a chain titled Estate Planning, Internal Only. I clicked it open. It was a conversation between my parents, Sabrina, and a real estate attorney. At first, it was routine, zoning questions, probate concerns. Then a line from Sabrina made my fingers go cold. "Davina's priorities don't align with long-term family legacy. We should consider excluding her from future revisions for simplicity." There it was, cold, efficient, clean. No room for discussion, no questioning my intentions, just a quiet removal, years before any papers were drawn up. I sat back, numb. All this time, I thought I was just busy. Too many work trips, missed calls. I chalked it up to life. But it wasn't random. I remembered the vacations they didn't tell me about, the sudden change in tone when legal matters came up, the moments I brushed off because who wants to believe their own family is phasing them out? Now I had it. In writing. I printed the email, hands steady despite the tremor in my chest. This wasn't oversight. It was strategy. In that moment, the weight of it all settled in. They didn't forget me. They removed me. With intent, with time, with coordination. But not anymore. I placed the email in the same folder as the trust papers. Then I added something else, a copy of last year's bank statement showing every dollar I'd quietly paid toward estate taxes. Let them try to ignore that. "They didn't just forget me," I said to the empty room. "They erased me, and now they're going to remember." That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sabrina's smug grin and my mother's quiet gaze from a dozen moments that suddenly felt full of meaning. By sunrise, the decision was made. I drove across town, past the park where I used to walk with Emery, gripping the wheel like it might break. This wasn't about confrontation. I wanted clarity, one thread of decency to hold on to. I picked up a bouquet of white tulips from a street vendor. Mom always said they reminded her of peace. Maybe she'd see it as an olive branch. She opened the door herself, still in her robe, eyes surprised but not unkind. "Davina," she said, stepping aside. "Come in." The sunroom was warm, bathed in soft light. She poured tea. I handed her the flowers and tried not to look desperate. "I just want to talk," I said, sitting across from her, "about the house, about everything." I laid it out, calmly at first. The mortgage filing, the old email, my payments, the trust. Her eyes didn't widen, her hands didn't tremble. She just stared into her teacup. Then I asked, "Mom, did you know? Did you know what they were planning?" She took a long breath and looked up at me. "Your sister is starting a family," she said. "She needs this more than you do." A crack split open inside me. Not denial, not shock, just justification. "It's not about needing, Mom. It's about lying," she sighed. "You've always been so sensitive. This wasn't meant to hurt you." I swallowed the ache. "Then why does it feel like I was written out of my own family?" Her voice softened, but not enough. "We had to simplify things. You were always so busy." Sabrina stepped up. No apology, no admission, just a quiet verdict. I didn't count. I stood. Not fast, not loud, just final. "I'm not here for permission. I'm not here to beg," I said. "If this keeps going, I'll bring everything to light. The trust, the payments, the documents, all of it." She blinked. Her lip trembled, but she said nothing. I moved toward the door. On the hallway wall, our family photos lined the trim, smiling faces, grandkids, beach trips. But mine was missing. A deliberate space, a quiet erasure. I paused, hand on the doorknob. "You taught me to protect what's mine," I whispered, "even if that means protecting it from you." The silence stretched for 3 days, not even a check-in from Eleanor. Then, just after lunch on Friday, a message lit up my phone. From Dad. "We need to talk about formalities. Come by tomorrow evening." Formalities. That was Dad's favorite way of softening ugly truths. I already knew what this was, a push to make it official, but I was done playing defense. The next evening, I walked into the study where I used to do my homework as a kid. Now, it smelled like lemon polish and betrayal. Gordon sat behind his desk like a CEO. Across from him, Sabrina and Martin perched on the edge of the couch, smug and comfortable. A thick manila envelope lay waiting. "It's just a formality," Dad said, sliding it toward me. "A simple waiver. You've always had your career. Your sister's building a family now. This will make everything smoother for the future." I opened it. A quitclaim deed. Signing it meant giving up any past, present, or future legal right to the estate. "Is this a joke?" I asked. "No one's trying to hurt you," Eleanor added from the doorway. "We're just being practical." My gaze swept the room. 4 people pretending this was fairness. Sabrina wouldn't even meet my eyes. "You're not asking me to sign a paper?" I said, voice low but sharp. "You're asking me to vanish." Martin chuckled. "Oh, come on. Don't make this bigger than it is." I put the pen down. "No." Gordon leaned forward. "Davina, I've paid property taxes on this house for nearly a decade, out of my own pocket, from a trust you didn't even know existed. And now you want me to walk away so Sabrina can slap her name on a deed she didn't earn?" Sabrina scoffed. "You were never around." I cut her off. "And yet I was the only one keeping the lights on." I looked at Dad. "You spent years pretending I didn't care, but you were never paying attention." Martin muttered under his breath, "Jesus, she's dramatic." I stopped at the door, turned slowly, and met his eyes. "Keep pushing," I said, "and I'll show you what dramatic really looks like." 2 days later, I parked in front of the estate with no announcement, no agenda, just a need to collect the last of my things. No one was supposed to be home. The plan was to be invisible. I entered through the side door, letting the scent of lemon oil and aged wood guide me down the hall. My feet led me instinctively to Granddad's old study. The room had been quiet since his funeral, still as a photograph. I bent to grab a small stack of books I'd left in the corner, but something poking out from beneath a side table caught my eye. Blueprints, rolled tight, bound in a rubber band. I pulled them free, expecting maybe renovations for the kitchen or roof. But what I saw knocked the breath from my chest. Plans to gut the eastern wing, where Emery's library stood. His sanctuary, the shelves he carved by hand, the stained glass skylight he designed for moonlight reading. Gone. To make way for a gym and a media lounge, scrawled in Sharpie on the margins. I sank into his old armchair, the blueprints shaking in my lap. They weren't just stealing the estate. They were erasing its soul. I called Walter. "They're planning demolition," I said. "The library, Emery's library." There was a pause on the line, then his voice, low and deliberate. "If they file for demolition, it triggers a legal review. The trust will red flag the title." Finally, a line in the sand. I hung up, already opening my laptop. First, I emailed the local historical society, attaching photos of the library's craftsmanship. Then I messaged Rachel Feldman, an old friend from college, now a reporter for the Herald. Let them try to build their fantasy house on bones. I gathered the trust documents, stacked them with the demolition plans, and slipped them into my bag. As I stepped outside, the sun dipped low over the trees. Martin was coming up the driveway, dressed like he owned the place. He looked startled. "Didn't expect you here today," I smiled. "I know, that's the fun part." By Saturday afternoon, the estate had been staged like a showroom. Hors d'oeuvres circled on trays, soft jazz played from corner speakers, and local donors mingled with board members of the Preservation Society. At the center of it all stood Martin, beaming like he was hosting a charity gala, not a hostile takeover. I stayed near the back, arms crossed, watching him flash his polished grin and say, "We're reimagining Oak Ridge, making it fit the times." He went on about open floor plans, decluttering the past, and legacy stewardship. He even called himself the estate manager. That was the final straw. I stepped forward, slow and certain. "You're not the manager. You don't hold any legal authority here." The room hushed. Martin laughed awkwardly. "Davina, let's not—" "No," I cut in. "Let's." I pulled a folder from my tote and held it up. "These are trust documents. Your name isn't anywhere on them. You have no deed, no legal appointment. You're not managing anything. You're playing pretend." Gasps broke around us like shattered glass. Sabrina went pale. My father stiffened. Martin tried to speak again, but his voice cracked. The meeting fell apart within minutes. Donors left quietly. The society's representative promised to review everything. I stepped outside for air, heart pounding, when I heard the door open behind me. It was Eleanor. Her face was tight, eyes unreadable. "You went too far," she said. "This could have stayed in the family." I turned slowly, my voice low. "You already chose which part of the family mattered." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Found this in your desk, sealed, unopened." She froze. I unfolded the letter, my fingers trembling. Emery's handwriting, bold and unmistakable. "If you're reading this, Davina," it began, "they've tried to rewrite what we built, protect Oak Ridge. You were always the one who understood." I looked at her. "You kept this from me." She didn't deny it. "Because I knew once it started, it would never stop. You'd burn every bridge." "No," I said. "You burned them when you decided silence was safer than standing up for what was right." Sabrina stepped out then, already on the defense. "You're twisting things." "No," I said again, louder this time. "I'm revealing them." And I walked away, Emery's letter in one hand, the truth in the other. 2 days after the explosion at the estate gathering, I arranged a formal meeting at Walter Jenkins' office. Neutral ground, hardwood floors, dusty bookshelves, a fireplace nobody ever lit. They arrived together, Gordon, Eleanor, Sabrina, Martin, seated across from me like it was a business negotiation. They still thought I was bluffing. Walter adjusted his glasses, glanced at me, then opened the leather-bound file I handed him. "This," he said, voice steady, "is the Harrington Legacy Trust, executed and witnessed by Emery himself." He flipped a page. "Davina Harrington is the sole trustee and beneficiary of the estate known as Oak Ridge. All decisions regarding its preservation, use, or transfer rest solely with her." The room went silent. Walter's voice cut through it again. "Any attempt to mortgage, demolish, or reallocate ownership, without her explicit consent, is void." Gordon's jaw clenched. Sabrina's mouth dropped open. Martin leaned forward like he could talk his way around it. Then came the second blow. "I must also disclose," Walter said slowly, "that shortly after Emery's passing, Gordon asked me to keep this trust document quiet. He didn't want it filed, said he needed time to restructure the family's path forward." Eleanor gasped. "You said you were protecting us." "I was protecting your plan," Walter corrected, "not the law, and certainly not Emery's wishes." Sabrina turned to Gordon, eyes sharp. "You told me she was out, that there was nothing left to fight for." Martin stood up. "This changes nothing. It changes everything," I said, rising to my feet. "You've all treated me like a placeholder, a burden, but I've been the one holding this place up for years." I laid out my terms, voice even. "No demolition, no remodel. You're out of this house permanently. I'm applying for historical status. Oak Ridge will be protected, legally and publicly." Gordon tried to speak again. Walter cut him off. You've lost all authority here. The trust stands. Sabrina stormed out, muttering obscenities under her breath. Martin followed, throwing one last glare my way. Eleanor didn't move. Her eyes were glassy, mouth closed. But still, she said nothing. I crossed the room and placed Emery's letter on the fireplace mantel, right beneath his portrait. He trusted me, and I kept that promise. The next morning, I woke to the hush of Oak Ridge. No footsteps upstairs, no whispers in the hallway, just the soft creak of wood settling, the sound of the house breathing again. For the first time, I felt it was breathing with me. The sun spilled through the library skylight, catching dust motes in golden streams. I sat beneath it, coffee warming my hands, Emery's letter resting beside me on the old armchair. He built this place with patience and vision. I had fought to keep it with truth. It hadn't been about revenge, not really. It was about memory, honor, lineage. Word of what happened had already begun to spread. Gordon had quietly stepped down from his position on the legal board, citing personal matters. His silence in the papers spoke louder than any denial. Sabrina and Martin sold their condo in the city and moved out of state. No farewell, no explanation. But people whispered. They always do. I never corrected the stories. I didn't need to. Eleanor sent me a handwritten note, short, slanted, heavy with unsaid things. You were right. I just wasn't strong enough to stand beside you. There was no apology. But there was recognition. And for now, that would do. Oak Ridge was declared a historical landmark 3 weeks later. I hosted an open house with the local history society. The town showed up. So did Walter. So did old neighbors who remembered Emery's gardening lectures or his annual 4th of July stories. One woman told me, he'd be proud of what you've done. That night, I stood alone outside beneath the oak tree, the same one Emery planted the day my mother was born. I looked up through the branches, felt the weight of what had been saved, not just wood and walls, but truth. I wasn't healed, not completely, but I wasn't invisible anymore. Back inside, I closed the library doors, the letter still on the mantel beside Emery's photo. I whispered to both. Some people inherit legacy, others protect it. I was never meant to inherit Oak Ridge. I was meant to fight for it. Sometimes the people you love most will ask you to shrink yourself, quiet your voice, doubt your worth, for the sake of keeping peace. But silence isn't peace, and loyalty shouldn't come at the cost of your dignity. What I learned from this fight wasn't just about legal rights or family property. It was about remembering who I am, without their permission. Legacy isn't just what's handed down to you. Sometimes it's what you refuse to let go of. And maybe, just maybe, the fiercest kind of love is the kind that protects what others are too afraid to. So let me ask you, have you ever had to stand your ground when everyone expected you to stay quiet? Have you ever protected something, an idea, a place, a part of yourself, because no one else would? I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from, or just type 1 if this story resonated with you in any way. And hey, if it didn't, that's okay too. Tell me why. I'm here to listen, not just speak. If this video moved you, inspired you, or even made you think a little deeper, go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Your support helps us keep telling real human stories that matter. Thank you for being here.